They left the city behind before dawn. 4 friends, laughing through the quiet, the world still wrapped in blue morning light. Ethan drove, as always, windows down, the cold air rushing in. He loved that feeling, the promise of somewhere unknown. Maria sat beside him, hands wrapped around a thermos, pretending not to worry. She'd warned him they were going too far this time, too deep into a region with no cell service and few maps. But Ethan only grinned, the way he always did when a line was about to be crossed. In the back, Liam and Jenna dozed against the windows. Liam, the eternal optimist, could find something to laugh about anywhere. Jenna, quieter, preferred to watch, the kind of person who saw what others missed. They'd planned the trip for weeks, a hidden trail in the northern mountains said to lead to a forgotten waterfall, the Silver Veil, according to local rumors. No GPS pin, no guideposts, only a vague outline on an old ranger's map Ethan found online. To him, that made it perfect. It wasn't supposed to be a test of survival, just one last wild adventure before life got serious. Jobs, apartments, routine. By the time the sun rose over the ridges, the road had turned to gravel, then to dirt. The forest swallowed them whole, thick evergreens stretching for miles. They parked at a small clearing, loaded their packs, and started walking. The first few hours were beautiful. Sunlight broke through the canopy in golden streaks. The air smelled of pine and rain. The sound of rushing water echoed somewhere ahead. They joked, took photos, followed the faint trail markers carved into tree bark decades ago. But around noon, the path began to fade. The trees grew denser, the slope steeper. Ethan insisted they were close, that the waterfall had to be just over the next ridge. Maria hesitated. She said maybe we should mark our trail, but Ethan brushed it off. We'll be fine. By the time they realized how lost they were, it was too late. The forest all looked the same, endless green, twisting shadows. When they tried to backtrack, the markers were gone. Even their footprints had vanished in the damp soil. Panic hadn't set in yet. They laughed it off. "We'll find it," Liam said. "It's a forest, not a maze." But as the hours passed, that confidence began to fade. The sun slipped behind clouds, and the temperature dropped fast. The wind turned cold and sharp. Ethan pulled out the compass. It spun aimlessly, needle twitching. Jenna tried her phone. No signal. Not even a flicker. By sunset, they were still walking, exhausted, thirsty, the laughter gone. The forest seemed to close in tighter with each step. When thunder rolled across the sky, they knew they had to find shelter. Rain came suddenly, a torrential downpour that soaked them to the bone. They stumbled downhill, slipping on wet roots, until Maria spotted something through the trees. A structure. It was an old cabin, half rotten, slanted against the hillside. Moss covered the roof, the windows shattered, but it stood. They ran for it, dragging their packs inside just as lightning split the sky. The interior smelled of damp wood and decay. There were old tools on the wall, a broken table, and the remnants of a fire pit in the corner. It had clearly been abandoned for decades. They huddled near the hearth, using whatever scraps they could find to start a fire. The warmth was weak, but enough to keep them from freezing. They told themselves they'd rest for the night, find the trail again in the morning. But none of them truly believed it. Sometime during the night, Maria awoke to a sound outside. Slow, deliberate, footsteps crunching on wet leaves. She held her breath. It wasn't the wind. The fire had burned low, flickering shadows across the walls. She leaned forward, peering through the window frame, but saw nothing except darkness. Then another sound, closer, a branch cracking. She woke Ethan, whispering that something was out there. He listened, eyes narrowing. "Probably an animal," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But Jenna, still half asleep, whispered something that silenced them all. "It's been pacing for a while." In the silence that followed, they heard it too. Slow, measured movement around the cabin. They didn't sleep after that. By morning, the rain had stopped. The forest was eerily quiet. When they stepped outside, they found prints in the mud, large, barefoot, and human. None of them spoke for a long time. Jenna noticed something hanging from a tree nearby, a charm made of sticks and twine, twisted into a crude symbol. It swung gently in the breeze. Ethan told them not to touch it. They left the cabin behind and started moving again, following the sound of distant water. Their hope was to find a stream. Water meant life, and eventually it would lead them to civilization. But the deeper they went, the stranger the forest felt. The light never seemed to change, as if time had stalled. Familiar landmarks disappeared behind them. They would swear they were walking downhill, yet kept ending up higher. By afternoon, Liam slipped on a slick rock and fell, twisting his ankle. The bone didn't break, but he could barely walk. Ethan and Maria helped him along, taking turns carrying his pack. Every step became a struggle. When they stopped to rest, Jenna noticed something in the distance. An old wooden post. Relief flooded through her. Maybe a sign, a marker. But when they reached it, they realized it was just a decayed trail sign, the words long eroded away. The forest was reclaiming everything. As the second night fell, they made camp under a rocky overhang. The temperature plunged. They had only one small fire left to keep them warm. Liam's ankle had swollen badly. He tried to keep spirits up with jokes, but his voice trembled. Ethan sat beside him, guilt written across his face. Maria stared into the fire. "We shouldn't have come this far," she said softly. No one disagreed. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat awake, staring at the trees. In the distance, he saw it again. Movement between the trunks, tall, human-shaped, watching. He blinked, and it was gone. At dawn, fog rolled in thick and heavy. They moved slowly, following the faint sound of rushing water. When they finally reached the edge of a ravine, they could see a river below, their first real hope in days. But the slope was steep and slick. They had no choice but to climb down. Ethan went first, using a rope from his pack to secure the descent. Maria followed, then Jenna. Liam hesitated, pain radiating through his leg. Halfway down, the rope snapped. Ethan fell the last 10 feet, hitting the rocks hard. He didn't move. Maria screamed his name, sliding down after him. He was alive, but barely conscious. A deep gash across his forehead, his leg twisted wrong. They built a small shelter by the riverbank, using branches and leaves. Maria tore her jacket to bind Ethan's leg, while Jenna collected water. Liam tried to help, but could barely stand himself. That night, the rain returned. They pressed close under the crude roof, the storm howling outside. The sound was deafening, like the forest itself was breathing around them. Ethan's fever grew. He mumbled in delirium, names and fragments of memories. Maria stayed beside him all night, holding his hand, whispering for him not to die. By morning, his fever broke, but his strength was fading fast. They followed the river, slow and steady, hoping it would lead them out. The water glistened in the sunlight, but the woods on both sides seemed endless. Every few miles they found strange signs, trees carved with symbols, piles of stone stacked deliberately. At one point, they came across a rusted lantern hanging from a branch, still swaying as if someone had just left. Liam's usual humor was gone. He looked pale, exhausted, but he kept walking. Then, finally, they heard something new, a distant metallic clang, rhythmic and faint. They followed it through the trees until the forest opened into a clearing. At the center stood a ranger tower, old, weathered, leaning slightly to one side, but it was real. Hope surged through them. Maria and Jenna ran toward it while Liam and Ethan limped behind. Inside, they found an old desk, rusted tools, and a broken radio. Liam twisted the dials. Static filled the room. He tried again and again until, finally, a voice crackled through. "To Station 3, copy. Repeat your coordinates." They shouted into the mic, begging for help. The voice broke in and out, almost lost in static, but it was something. Hours passed with no response. Then, as evening fell, they heard something outside. A rustle, a shadow moving between the trees. Jenna looked out the window and froze. The same figure from before, still watching. Liam fired the last flare they had. The red light exploded over the treetops. The figure vanished into the mist. Minutes later, they heard it, the distant chop of helicopter blades. They burst out of the tower, waving their arms, shouting. The light from above cut through the fog, circling once, twice, before lowering. They were found just before nightfall. Ethan was lifted first, barely conscious but alive. Maria and Jenna clung to each other, sobbing with relief. Liam sat silently, staring at the forest, expression unreadable. From the air, the woods looked endless, a sea of green stretching beyond sight. Later in the hospital, they learned strange details. The ranger tower hadn't been active for over 30 years. No cabin was listed in the area they'd described, and the search team found no footprints except their own. Whatever they'd seen, whoever had watched them, left no trace.
In the end, all 4 survived, but none of them were ever the same. Ethan, once fearless, rarely left the city again. Maria started hiking solo, trying to make peace with the mountains that nearly killed them. Liam spoke less, joked less. Jenna moved away entirely, refusing to talk about what happened. Sometimes in her sleep, she still dreamed of the forest, the silence, the strange symbols, the feeling of being observed. But the dreams always ended the same way, with the sound of the river, the flare bursting through the fog, and the endless question echoing in her mind. Why them? Why did the forest let them go when it never had before? Some places aren't meant to be found, and some stories aren't meant to be told. But for the 4 who came back from the edge of nowhere, survival wasn't luck, it was mercy.